Welcome everybody, and thank you for being here, for joining us for the Tribal Emergency Mitigation Planning webinar. My name is Aubrey Race. I am an Environmental Health Project Coordinator with the National Indian Health Board, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Today we are joined by representatives from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the Environmental Protection Agency, and Fort Peck Tribes. Before we get started, I just want to review a few housekeeping notes. Again, we are recording, so if you do not wish to be recorded, please drop off the call. All participants have been muted, and please leave yourself on mute unless this presenter asks you to unmute and engage. However, if you have trouble hearing to the presentation, please let an NIHB staff member know by sending them a direct message. So that would be to myself, Aubrey, or Rachel Tubles, who is joining me here today from the National Indian Health Board. A recorded version of this webinar will be available for viewing post-webinar on National Indian Health Board's YouTube channel. And I will also email all people, all registrants, the PowerPoint slides and a direct link to that YouTube channel once it is uploaded, hopefully next week. We encourage you to enter questions into the chat box throughout the webinar. And once we get to the Q&A portion of the webinar, you may type your questions or you can come off mute to ask the questions as well. Again, if you have any issues with any tech, please message myself or Rachel, and we can do our best to help you out. And now I would like to introduce our presenters. First, Kathleen Carlisle is a senior mitigation planner with FEMA in the National Mitigation Planning Program. She has over 15 years of experience coordinating and leading hazard mitigation programs at the local and federal level. Kathleen's specialties include hazard mitigation laws, regulations, programs, policies, and practices as it relates to floodplain management, planning, and assessing financial assistance. She received her graduate degree from the University of Oregon in planning, public policy, and management. We also have Abby Hall. Abby is a climate resilience social scientist with the EPA's Office of Policy. Abby has been with the EPA for nearly 18 years. Her specialties include land use planning, disaster resilience, and climate adaptation. She received her master's in anthropological sciences at Stanford University with a focus on land use and environmental policy. She is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. And finally, joining us today as well is Jeff Berger. Jeff is Fort Peck Tribes Disaster Emergency Services Director. And with that, I am going to share my screen with the presentation, and I will pass it over to you, Jeff.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Forgive me, I'm utilizing my cell phone. My computer's updating at this time. Right now, I was asked to help present on the hazard mitigation plan that we had developed, and Abby Hall was an integral part of helping us get our hazard mitigation plan squared away. And also Felicity Sobalski, I think she's on the call too. I'm not too sure, but yeah, a lot of the mitigation planning and partnerships that we had went through and still going through, it has been a kind of a daunting task. I started this position about 2 years ago, and it was a trial by fire for me, but it was also a very good learning experience for me also, going into understanding mitigation and what our tribe is facing. And it's a pretty interesting topic. Is there a next slide, please? Okay, as you can see, our reservation is up in the northeastern side of Montana, the northeastern area. And our reservation is pretty flat. We deal a lot with environmental hazards, i.e. Storms, We do have Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad coming through our reservation, Highway 2, one of the major highways in the state of Montana coming through our reservation, and a lot of different oil field activity and natural gas activities going on. And within our reservation boundaries, we did our best to really incorporate everything that we could do to help mitigate and help lessen the effects of these things that we deal with every day. Like our winters are very, very cold and our summers are hot. Like right now, we're dealing with 105 back home. I'm currently on the southwestern corner of the state right now at a Montana DES tribal meeting, but they allowed me to step away for a few minutes to be able to present here. But next slide, please. But our reservation, as you can see, this is a blown up map of our reservation. We also have the Missouri River and many other creeks, rivers, and streams running through our reservation, and we're one of the tribes that do retain our water rights. So we also have one of the biggest water treatment facilities on our reservation also, and that is a surface water treatment plant. And we not only service the whole reservation, we service majority of northeastern Montana as far as for drinking water, and it's so as you can see that was also incorporated in some of our mitigation planning and some of the things that we needed to protect as far as our resources on our reservation. But yes, we do have a lot of water running around our reservation, and that's one of the main things that we wanted to protect, because like I said, it's our main source of drinking water right now due to the pollution from a lot of the oil field activities that happened in the past, and we're dealing with it now. The practices that they worked with, a long time ago, obviously have changed to date, and it's created a very, very big problem on our reservation. So we had to find alternate ways of distributing or getting drinking water to our reservation, and our tribal council years ago decided, hey, let's get a water treatment facility, get it going and whatnot. So it very, very big undertaking, very big responsibility. Next slide, please. The the initial goals and processes that we went through is, we engaged the whole community, and there was some challenges in that. Our communities are so spread out on our reservation, and getting a lot of people to these community meetings, there was some challenges. But with the people that showed up, they offered a lot of good information, a lot of good insights to the things that we needed to pay attention to and work on and get implemented into our hazard mitigation plan for our reservation. And then once again, we went, as you can see through the slide, we developed the solutions to reduce the risks. Right now, with the solutions that we have developed, is some of them were for the extreme heat summers that we get, some cooling stations for our kids and our elders, and resilience hubs for them to where they can come and cool off, and we can distribute the water or whatever that may be, or the case may be. We develop these areas, and right now we're applying for the community change grant to help us reach the goals and that we want to get to. As you can see in the green circles, is create an action plan to implement the solutions, and we're implementing the action plan, and it's working. But the deadline for the community change grant has been bumped up to August 1st. So we're facing a lot of challenges there too, but we're doing the best we can, and right now it's looking good. But each and every day there's something new, and that hazard mitigation plans. This is, you know, take a look at it as a living document, something that's going to change, or something that might need to be tweaked or looked at again, to where we may need to think outside the box to change something or fix something. So, you know, that's another big challenge that we face every day going into this mitigation plan. Next slide, please. And as you can see, we had a lot of partners with this. You know, our partners also, that is not on here, is Great Northern Development Corporation. That's a nonprofit organization that's located within our reservation boundaries that is helping us go after the community change grant and apply for it. And they've been a very integral part in the process. But you know, FEMA, EPA, Fort Peck Tribes. Then we had our contractors, Spackman, Mossop, and Michaels, and also the Montana Climate Office. We've had a lot of help through some of the universities within the state of Montana, and you know, a lot of different other entities within the Fort Peck Tribes also that have helped out. It's been awesome partnering with each and every one of these individuals and companies. So it's been a learning experience for me. Next slide, please. Okay, you know, a lot of priorities, and one of the major priorities, creating a community-driven plan. And you know, that goes back to like our on-site workshops that we did, and our surveys, and you know, design for the plans that our community members had brought forward, and some of the concerns that they had, and you know, trying to incorporate everything into what we're looking at, the problems, and also the cultural knowledge and understanding to create something specifically for our tribe and our people. And it's been very interesting. Like I said, it's been a learning experience, and it was something I learned something new every day. And you know, it was very awesome to have a lot of our elders involved in this, and a lot of our community members with the cultural knowledge and aspects and views. Because you know, in one hand, FEMA may take a look at as storms in a negative way, but with us, it's a renewal for our nations there in the Fort Peck Tribes. We come from the Nakota, Dakota, and Lakota tribes, and with our cultural understanding, storms is a thing of renewal, but it could create life and take life at the same time. So, you know, we have to be prepared and have that understanding also, that there could be negative side effects of this, and we need to be prepared and help our people as hopefully lessen the effects of these storms and these events that start happening on our reservation. So it was something new and something very awesome to be a part of. Next slide, please. And we had a lot of internal engagement. You know, with the internal engagement, we're talking about all the departments of our tribes, and including all the people that were involved with federal and local state agencies. And you know, sometimes it was like herding cats, but you know, everybody came to and they gave their input and really gave a lot of good insight with their point of views from all our departments. And it was like I said, it was an awesome experience. Next slide, please. And public engagement, you know, like I said, it was kind of difficult at first, but once we start getting things out and getting things out to the public and having them, you know, bringing them to the table, you know, like I said, getting insight from our public, it was a very, very critical thing that we needed. And it just opened our eyes to even some of the simplest things could become a very, very great risk for our people. So we wanted to make sure that we're implementing all these ideas and statements and all these different things that the communities were bringing to us. And like I said, it was pretty awesome. It was something very how can I put this? It was something that was very touching because a lot of people were kind of afraid to come forward at first, but once they started to open up, they were sharing personal experiences, and those personal experiences, especially from a lot of the elders experiencing things from the past and up till now, helped us understand quite a bit about weather events, or cultural events, or even like just social events that have went on through our communities, and some of the things that have changed and some of the concerns that they have brought up is eye-opening. So that public planning process is a very, very huge integral part of the hazard mitigation plan. Next slide, please. As you can see, we even went into some of the schools and whatnot, and got a lot of different feedback from our kids, and some of them from teachers and adults and whatnot. And it was that that was a good learning experience. Also, our kids, they sometimes we brush them off like they don't understand or they may not know, but a lot of the things that we have read, and statements we read and went through, these kids see it. They pay attention. They're, by far they're not dumb, or they're, it's just something that they very, very well do pay attention to, and they have very strong concerns about it. So a lot of we went through all the different generations and age groups, and it was a pretty good, awesome turnout. Next slide, please. And as you can see, our timeline, we had the FEMA hazard mitigation planning funding, finding that funding source, and then we EPA equitable resilience and revitalization assistance program. And that was kind of when I first got on. I got an email from FEMA, hey, we need to finish this. We need to get this done. We have this funding sitting here. We need to get this taken care of. And so we got on it, and it just went through, and it was just like a wildfire. We're towards the end of this timeline, like, wow, this was crazy, and in I think it was January, I got the official letter from FEMA that our hazard mitigation plan was approved and accepted. And it was something that opened a lot of doorways for our tribe, and for myself, and it's been keeping me pretty busy lately, and it's been fun. It's been a very huge learning experience. So, as you can see with this timeline, there was a lot of work being done, a lot of meetings, a lot of different things with our council, and it's but right now we're still going. We're still applying for grants. We're still looking at funding sources to take care of what we need to get taken care of for the mitigation plans that we have. Next slide, please. And as you can see, these are some of the pictures or photos of some of the areas that we want to develop, and trying to get stuff designed and done. And it's just some like ideas that they brought forward, and some of those ideas were very, very important to our people, because it helped them understand a lot of different things, a lot of different events, processes, and process that, and go into the next steps of our next phases of our mitigation planning. Next slide, please. Other than that, I thank you for your time. If anybody has a question or anything, I have a little bit of time to answer questions. I'm sorry, I I kind of double booked here. I'm at another meeting, a very important meeting for the tribal structure for Montana State DES, and we're in negotiations with the state right now. So it's something pretty interesting, another learning experience. So, but I have some time for questions or whatever that you might want to ask.
Jeff, in the chat, there's a few people who are wondering if they could have access to a copy of the mitigation plan.
I now with our process, the copy of our mitigation plan is I have to go to our or directly to our board and get permission. And I'd have to have a request by email from each individual that would want that. Then I would have to go in, either get a blanket resolution passed or a separate resolution passed for each individual to be able to share that information. But I mean, I guess we do have some generalized information that we have that we can share. And I can get that rounded up and get it posted to whatever I need to get it posted to.
Okay, I'm sure you could just get that to Aubrey and then we could pass it along afterwards. But there are Brooke Bingaman asks if you feel that your tribe is adequately addressing heat issues, or do you think there's still more work to be done?
Oh, there's still more work to be done. I mean, we're with not hazard mitigation plan, we're looking for cooling stations or implementing these cooling stations. But with everything that's going on nowadays, I mean, I remember when I was younger, yeah, we would have some hot days here and there, but right now we're running into the third week straight of high 90s and 100-degree weather with 90% humidity up here in northeastern Montana, which is never used to be like that. And we've been having some very severe thunderstorm activity, and there's a lot of preparation, a lot of changes that we need to make within our infrastructure. So we're identifying everything and doing the best we can to administer or to change and fix or lessen the effect. But it's the funding sources and things like that are very limited. So we're trying to find as much funding as we can. So and the community survey that we conducted, yes, we can share those. One of the documents we can share. And the same thing with the agenda for facilitation guide. Like I said, the FEMA gals and Abby were very integral part in helping us out. Like I said, I started 2 years ago and it was a trial by fire. And those gals were very, very awesome and hardworking and diligent in helping the Fort Peck tribes. And so was Spackman, Mossop, and Michaels, the individuals that work there. They're phenomenal, very, very phenomenal contractor that really took this serious and they did a very good job.
Okay, I think for the sake of time, if you could just pass those documents along to us, whatever you think needs to be shared or would be useful, that would be great. Seems a lot of people are interested in those.
And yes, I can get those uploaded and sent off to Abby or whoever needs to be sent to. Once again, I'm on my phone on this meeting, and my computer decided it needed to update. So I was like, oh, well, I got to get on here, and I promised everybody I'd be on this meeting, and I wanted to make sure I was here. And okay, can you share the name of the contractor? I will share the name of the contractor. Spackman, Mossop, and Michaels. They are out of New Orleans, Louisiana.
I just put a link to their website in the chat too.
Oh, thank you, Abby. Yeah, they really helped us out. Like I said, it was a trial by fire. I worked with our Office of Environmental Protection for the Fort Peck tribes for a lot of years. I also worked a lot in the military with safety, environmental, uh, emergency services within the military, and this is actually taking over disaster emergency services role in our tribe has been something that's not new to me. But a lot of the documents and things that we had to develop, it is pretty new and daunting sometimes. But I'm I have a lot of good people I'm working with, like Abby and Felicity and Nicole Edwards, and I just can't name them all. There's so many of them that's helped me out so much. And yes, I will make sure I see, I'd like a copy of anything that can be shared, and I will, whatever I can share, I will get that sent off right away and make sure that everybody can hopefully get a copy of it, or, get some understanding and be able to get what they need and what they want to look at. But I will put my email in here. I don't know if it's up, but my email, I'll put that up here real quick. And if you have any questions, just don't hesitate to email me. And forgive me, I'll do my best to get back at you right away, but I've been so busy lately traveling for our tribe and doing, like I said, I didn't realize how much this was going to do for our tribe and for myself. And it's opened up so many doorways. So it's good though. It's good. It's keeping me busy and learning a lot. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being here with us. I know you're a busy man, got places to be, so we definitely appreciate your time.
well, I thank you. I'm gonna step off now. I got to get back to my other meeting, but I sure appreciate the opportunity and the time to present here and then give you a little bit of insight what we went through with the Fort Peck tribes. And once again, thank you. And I will email all the documentation that I can share as soon as possible.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right. And with that, I will pass it along to Kathleen.
Thank you. Thank you, Aubrey. And getting over a little upper respiratory infection, so forgive me if I need to grab some water here or there and do the best I can. It's really an honor to be presenting today to all of you, and I really want to thank the NIHB, Aubrey and Rachel and others for inviting FEMA to present today. I'm Kathleen Carlisle. I'm a mitigation planner with headquarters, and for the last several years, I've been focusing on tribal and state, but mostly tribal mitigation planning policy. And we are just getting ready to update our policy. This will be the second time I've been involved in updating the tribal mitigation policy. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And thanks to Jeff, I know he had to jump off, but really big thanks to Jeff and Felicity from FEMA Region 8 for that presentation. I just really believe it's most helpful to hear from other tribal nations, tribal governments that are working in mitigation planning, have experienced mitigation planning, the good and the bad. And it's just really wonderful to hear that story. And I heard it first at the hazard mitigation workshop last February that FEMA hosts. And Abby from EPA will be speaking, and this is again a great example of federal agencies coming together, because it's very difficult for tribes to deal with multiple federal agencies, sometimes slightly overlapping programs. We know it's not easy. It's a little clunky, but we are all, I know EPA and FEMA for sure, and reaching out to other agencies, very committed to more pilot projects, more projects, programs, activities where we can collaborate. And there was even there's the mitigation planning program, but also the BRIC, the FEMA Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities, that's what BRIC stands for, program at FEMA, and this direct technical assistance. And that's a newer program. but it's just great to see those things come together. So I'm really, really appreciative of that. This is an introductory webinar, so I assume I'm making assumptions that many of you don't have a lot of experience with mitigation planning, or you're kind of new to it anyway. So it will be somewhat of a high-level presentation. There are certainly many considerations, many details that come into the hazard mitigation planning process. Every process, every tribal experience is different. And as Jeff said, it was a big learning experience for him. So I just want to let you know that your FEMA regional mitigation planners are available to assist you, and you can reach out to them via your FEMA tribal liaison, your FEMA tribal relations specialist, and or your FEMA integration team, call those FEMA FITs. Whoever is the point of contact for your tribe, we understand that's usually the easiest way to do that. And most appropriate, reaching out to your POC from FEMA Tribal Affairs, and they can put you in touch with the FEMA regional planners. We also have some contact information we'll share, because the most important thing is really to have that dialogue, that conversation with your FEMA planners early. It's not something that tribe has to do by themselves and do a lot of guesswork. FEMA can assist early in the process and provide technical assistance. Okay, so next slide, please. So I'm just going to, as I said, high level overview of tribal mitigation planning. I'll talk a little bit about our policy update, and then we'll provide some additional resources. Okay, so an overview of tribal mitigation planning. So I always start with these definitions, lots of words here, but really wanting to reiterate the purpose of mitigation planning is to identify natural hazards that could affect and impact the tribal nation. And I really appreciated Jeff's words about that that duality. Rain is good. Storms are part of nature. It's not all bad, but there can be some impacts from severe storms and drought and fire and these things that are renewing, but can also cause some hardships as well. So this is the way FEMA's looking at it, but we're really, as we update our guidance and talk and speak with tribal nations, understanding these various ways to look at this. So identifying these hazards and then looking for some strategies. I'm going through that planning process and then looking for some strategies to reduce the losses from these hazards, taking advantage of a wide range of resources. So not only FEMA programs, but other federal agencies, possibly state agencies in some cases, private. There may be a number of resources available on the plan, can really be helpful in opening those doors. I appreciated that Jeff said it opens up doors, developing and updating these mitigation plans. And then hazard mitigation, the definition is really taking action to reduce or eliminate long-term risk from these hazard events. And we, mitigation is included with preparedness in resilience. That's our big department at FEMA. And preparedness is very related, but we always like to distinguish that a little bit from mitigation. Preparedness might be a more short-term way to avoid harm, possibly thinking about evacuation plans, thinking about placing sandbags, thinking about having 72 hours of food and water available to get through the emergency. Mitigation, on the other hand, is more of a long-term investment. is there a way to get some structures that are vulnerable to flooding out of the floodplain, or can defensible space be built around, for wildfire areas? It can be a subtle difference, but we like to really emphasize mitigation it's a little different than just kind of emergency preparedness. And planning is really a process, and that's really what Jeff was talking about, that process, bringing together all of those tribal government entities, talking to the public, talking to the kids in public schools, all of these things. It's part of this big planning process. And it really goes on. And even after the plan's complete, those individuals that were involved can still remain involved, and the plan kind of carries over. It's something they can follow, the folks that are involved, but really it is that process that continues. And then when we talk about the plan, that could be a physical copy of the plan, could be digital. It's this document, and I heard Jeff talk about, this living document, this mitigation plan itself. So that's really what we're referring to, that reference document. But planning is really a process that continues, even as staff turns over and new folks come in, that process continues, and the plan will guide that process. Next slide, please. So some of the benefits of mitigation planning, it helps increase awareness of the risk. Tribes can create their plan and to reduce risk in alignment with the values and priorities. It really is the tribe's plan. We have requirements and guidelines, but within those guidelines, this is really, a lot of these decisions are to be made in alignment with what those needs are, what the tribe's values are, and every tribe we know is different. So the plan allows for that. It helps identify assets that are vulnerable to natural hazards, and the tribal governments, tribal nations can work with partners to leverage resources. And I think that Fort Peck example is a great way to describe that. Building this foundation with the plan and reaching out to others that can help advance these mitigation goals. And another big benefit we'll talk about in a couple of slides, obviously, is the access to funding for several FEMA programs. Next slide, please. So just quickly, we wanted to just visually show, these are the FEMA regions, the 10 regions, and the states that are part of those regions. And within those regions, located in those geographic areas are federally recognized tribes, and these are the numbers, and they may be slightly over and under depending on how that's counted. This is really thinking about the FEMA region that has the responsibility for serving particular tribes. Sometimes the boundaries might cross states or regions. But you can see in Region 10, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska. And Alaska really, that's the vast majority of tribes are in Alaska. And then the percentage of the number there is the number of approved or approved pending adoption mitigation plans in the region, and the percentage. So you'll see a slightly lower percentage in Region 10 and Region 9, but there are a lot more tribes. And in Region 10, of course, many of them are in Alaska, and there are many challenges for Alaska Native villages developing mitigation plans. And we're very fortunate because now we actually have a planner located in Anchorage. We haven't had that before the last couple of years, year and a half or so. And we do have planners in the Seattle area as well, but it's great to have someone in Anchorage and more on the ground assisting in Alaska. So this is, and then on the East Coast, you see, smaller numbers, and maybe in some cases slightly higher percentages. I think part of this for the FEMA team was just thinking about resources and the challenges, and the need really for more planners, especially in regions like, let's say 6, 9, and 10. Next slide, please. And there are a couple of types of tribal mitigation plans. Most frequently, we see a single tribe do a single plan for the tribe, one plan developed by one tribal government. Sometimes, though, it's advantageous for tribes to team up with municipalities and other governments and create what we call a multi-jurisdictional plan. It's a way to share resources. If the tribes and the municipalities share boundaries and and other things in common, it might be a very efficient way to do that. In Alaska, they frequently do that, and it just makes more sense in many cases for them to do that. One thing to keep in mind is that there is a section of the regulation 44 CFR 201.7 that is for reviewing tribal mitigation plans. And our tribal mitigation guide, our guidance really kind of has a dual role. It's for the plan reviewers that are reviewing the plans to ensure they're compliant with the regulations, but also for tribal governments to understand the regulations. So that's just kind of the dual nature of that, of our policy guidance. But we do have other guidance that's not regulatory. And I can talk about that in a little bit later in the presentation. Next slide, please. So these are the grants that are these are the FEMA grants for which a mitigation plan may be required. But before talking about those, I just wanted to point out for the first 2 lines there, individual assistance, so those immediate individual needs, shelter, some minor funding available for immediate repairs, things like that. That is not a mitigation plan is not required for individual assistance, and frequently tribes can do their own declarations now, since the Sandy Recovery Improvement Act several years ago. So that is possible, and many tribes do their own declarations for just for individual assistance. It kind of depends on the nature of the disaster. But that is not a plan is not required for that, nor is it required for emergency public assistance, so debris removal and any emergency measures. For categories C through G, at least for a direct applicant to FEMA, a mitigation plan is required, and that is damaged public buildings for the most part and other publicly owned infrastructure. So that's kind of that, just think about damaged property versus the emergency measures. And then the Fire Management Assistant Grant, which is a different FEMA program for wildfire. You can see it's required for an applicant, but not sub-applicant. And then there are all these hazard mitigation programs. There's the HMGP, which is based on, the funding is based on the disaster valuation. And that plan is required for that. If the tribe is a sub-applicant through the state for HMGP, for a planning grant, a plan's not required there. A planning grant under BRIC, a plan is not required. I really wanted to point that out because to get the funding to do a plan in the first place, there are some ways to do that without having to have a plan. So when you're just getting started, planning a plan is not required there. But when you get into projects, the project type funding, that's when the plan is required. So we really encourage tribal nations to think about getting a plan in place. If there's no plan in place, do what you can do to get a planning grant from FEMA, or sometimes I've seen a case where BIA has funded planning grants in Alaska. I mean, there may be other resources, but definitely reach out to your FEMA mitigation planner and also hazard mitigation specialists to look at how you could get a planning grant and get that started. And that BRIC DTA program is another program to apply for if you're interested in that as well. There are more projects and different purposes for BRIC DTA. Some tribes may already have a plan and they want to work on some grant applications, but just getting going and planning is one reason to think about that as well. So definitely want to think about that early. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll kind of go over this a little quicker. So the current, and next slide, please, the current policy. So if you look, go to our FEMA links that we'll share in this presentation, you'll find this current guidance, which was released in 2017. It is still in effect. Even, as we're updating our guidance now, if let's say it's released in early 2025, there's a year before it becomes effective. So really it would be 2026. So this is the guide that's in effect now. So if you're working on plans now, this is the current guidance. And we did have a tribal consultation and a lot of engagement and work to kind of streamline the guidance. It was updated before this in 2010, so it had been a while. Okay, next slide, please. So FEMA's role in all of this is to oversee the pre and post mitigation programs and activities, share data and information with the tribe, review and approve plans every 5 years. But I think the blue box is the most important. FEMA provides technical assistance and training. So it's not just sit around and wait for the plan to be submitted. They are available, the planners are available to help provide training, technical assistance to assist the tribe to get that plan in place. Next slide, please. And for the tribe, it's, I would say first reaching out to FEMA, preparing and adopting the mitigation plan. And the tribe might coordinate directly with FEMA, but in many cases, there are states that work with tribes very successfully, and tribes really prefer to just work through the state. So it very much depends. And then again, update that plan every 5 years, or ensure that it's approved every 5 years. So submitting it in advance of that. Next slide, please. Our guiding principles for mitigation planning in the current guidance that you'll see, a nation-to-nation relationship, really, again, thinking about cooperation and understanding. So dialogue, early, often, training, technical assistance, and understanding all the different scenarios, all the different situations. Focusing on mitigation strategy. There's a lot of effort that will go into risk assessment. That's a technical topic, but really thinking about what is the strategic action plan for mitigation. Again, the guides very much written for plan reviewers. So asking FEMA and the plan reviewers to think about intent and not just letter of the law when reviewing. Really focusing on that planning process, and that this is the tribe's plan, and thinking a lot about tribal sovereignty and all the, the tribe knows, there's indigenous knowledge, the tribe knows what's important. So that's just a guiding principle for FEMA to think about. Next slide, please. The steps of mitigation planning. This is laid out in our handbook, which we have a reference to that. We'll share with you here. Really recommend that document, because that is the document that assists with developing plans. It's not just the rules and the requirements, but how to develop a plan. So describing the community, identifying the hazards, that's the risk assessment, obviously having a robust planning process, understanding impacts, which is, what structures, people, thinking about everything that could potentially be impacted in a negative way. And we know there's positive and negative. Also, reviewing capabilities. What strengths does the tribe have now to do mitigation? There's a lot that the tribe may already be doing that contributes to mitigation. So to kind of taking stock of that, then developing the action plan, and then keeping track of progress. So those are really the steps. They don't have to be done in any particular order, but it's just kind of that cycle of planning that's laid out in the handbook. Next slide, please. There is a standard tribal mitigation plan, which is required to be eligible for the programs we talked about earlier. And for the hazard mitigation grant program, tribes eligible for 15% of the estimated disaster assistance under the Stafford Act. So that's, again, disaster related. HMGP is disaster related. If a tribe had an enhanced plan, went above and beyond the standard requirements, demonstrated ability to manage FEMA grants, which is often one of the biggest challenges. It definitely is, and we're thinking about that. It's one of the harder parts about being enhanced, but there is an additional 5% that's available. So if a tribe were coming to FEMA direct, they had an enhanced plan, they could receive some additional funding. There currently aren't any enhanced plan tribes. We hear of interest. There may be in the next couple of years, but currently there aren't, and we will be looking to see what's possible to update in this section in the update. It's very tied to, in the regulations, to section 201.5, which are the state enhanced requirements. Rules were never passed specifically for tribal enhanced. So that's kind of what we have to work with for now, unless we can update our regulations. But we'll talk a little bit more. There's a lot more information about that in our in the guide. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the handbook. I want to ensure, and I think we can share these slides with everyone. If you can go to the link there, you can get access to this handbook. Sometimes I think it's possible to get printed copies from the region. It's by request if that's needed. But I really recommend this guide because it contains lots of worksheets, examples. It's much more practical and helpful for plan development than just the policy guide. Next slide, please. And we have training available that we based upon that handbook. And you can again, reach out to FEMA if you're interested in one of these trainings. I know they have been doing some really innovative trainings in Region 10 and in Alaska with combining municipalities and tribes together on multi-hazard mitigation planning. So it's somewhat customizable. Northern Arizona University, the Institute for Environmental, I'm blanking, I'm blanking on the name, but the Environmental Institute at Northern Arizona University has actually given this training to a 70 tribe cohort, and we're trying to work with them. Tribal Environmental Professionals, that's the name, ITEP. We're trying to work with them to do another training in the future. But that was very successful, and that link will take you to the site. Next slide, please. We also have an independent study course that's free. You can link to it. This is a live link. And that's just self-paced, very informative on hazard mitigation planning. And there's a wonderful video in the beginning, a testimonial from a tribe in the Northwest talking about the value of mitigation planning, and similar to what we were hearing from Jeff. So very much recommend that. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is our policy update schedule, tentative. We did have tribal engagement in 2023. We had 2 virtual consultations and 2 in-person consultations, one in Alaska, at the Alaska Federation of Natives Conference, and one in New Orleans at NCAI. We're currently writing and drafting the update based on all the feedback we received. We have a FEMA integrated tribal team with planners that might mainly work with tribes. We hope to release that. Our initial plan was toward the end of this year, could be early next year. And then 1 year from that date, the policy would become effective. And in between, we would work with all tribes to ensure a smooth transition. Next slide, please. I encourage you to look at our national tribal strategy, which was released a couple of years ago. We want to make sure our policy is consistent with that and as well as our FEMA strategic plan, and also making sure that it's updated with BRIC and all of these new programs, because a lot's changed since 2017. Next slide, please. From tribal consultation, these were just some of the things we heard. The importance of tribal sovereignty, indigenous knowledge, the challenge of accessing funding, and how much time that can take, limited familiarity with planning, a lot of staff turnover. It's very, very common. What is the right amount of outreach and communication, and how can FEMA do more of that without being overwhelming? Clarity in reducing duplication. How can we work with other agencies like EPA and others where our programs overlap, to ensure that we're working seamlessly and not there aren't a lot of different programs coming to the tribe with a lot of similar requirements. The plan approval period, 5 years seems like a long time, but it isn't. That's more set up in regulation, but we're looking at some, ways that we can make updates more efficient. Training and technical assistance needs, there are many of them, and it's hard to meet all of them. And then, of course, planned status and land status. There are places, certain tribes have non-contiguous land ownership. There's certainly challenges in Alaska related to land ownership, and you have corporations there, Alaska Native corporations, and different entities control different things. So that can be a challenge. We do have a report. It's live. So if you click on that link, you can see our summary of feedback report based on the consultations. Next slide, please. Okay, we're almost finished. So these are links to our mitigation planning webpage, which has a tribal section with all of the information that I've been talking about today and more. FEMA Tribal Affairs has this tribal hub that's been updated in the last year. It's a really great resource. And then our FEMA contacts, click on that to get all of our regional planner contacts, but probably it's most efficient to go through Tribal Affairs. Next slide, please. This is the FEMA Tribal Affairs Hub, and I just wanted to, where you see the red arrow, if you go onto this Tribal Affairs Hub, you'll see this link to grants and mitigation planning for tribes. That's a one-stop shop for all of these resources that I've been talking about today. So I really recommend that you go there and take a look. Next slide, please. And these are just some more, our regulation there and the CFR, the guide, which we're updating, the handbook that I mentioned, and our training, our summary reports, kind of all the things that we've talked about. We also have some YouTubes that you can take a look at as well. Next slide. I think that's it. Okay, and there's some emails there for you. I haven't been watching the chat, so let me know if there's questions, if there's time. And if we don't have time to get to all of them, we promise we will, if you leave your contact information, your email, we will reply.
Thanks so much, Kathleen. I think due to time, we're going to jump on to Abby's portion. We can follow up with questions at the end of that.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Thanks, Kathleen. All right, Abby, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks. Hi, everybody. Well, I'm so glad that Jeff Berger got to go first. And so I'll kind of just pick up on what he shared from his perspective as the lead for the Assiniboine and Sioux tribes. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about, I think what we're trying to learn is at the federal level of what worked well in that project. You heard Jeff say it was a good project for him, what worked well there and what we did differently and how we can do more of that as we move forward, partnering between EPA and FEMA in particular. So next slide. You saw this picture already from Jeff, but I have it in my presentation, and I think it sums up one of the really key things that we did do differently in this project. So this is one of the first maps you see in the hazard mitigation plan. And it reflects something that we saw on the first site visit that EPA, FEMA, and our contractors from Spackman, Mossett, Michaels, when our first site visit there, some staff showed us a map on the walls of their agricultural plan. And they talked about how the waterways on the reservation appear to create the sort of silhouette of a buffalo and how important the buffalo are for them, and that's like really meaningful for them, that on the reservation you have this sort of image in a map view of something that is so important to them. So we were like, let's put that right up front in the hazard mitigation plan. This is your plan. It should be based around things you care about. So I think it's great that we have such a clear visual symbol of centering what the tribes wanted in this plan right up front. Next slide. So EPA and FEMA, we brought different types of support from each of our agency. EPA, we offered free place-based design assistance, which was a great complement with the hazard mitigation planning process, because it sort of brought this conceptual, what can feel like a conceptual planning process, down to earth in these very specific locations in the community. And I think we had good community engagement because we started with that. We started with, hey, we're going to maybe design a park or a resilience hub in your town. You want to come look at the designs for that and weigh in? And we got a lot of people showing up. at the wellness center, at the community center, to look at that and to weigh in a way that maybe they wouldn't quite come out in their evening time to talk about hazard mitigation planning. And then, as Jeff mentioned, we also had some free technical assistance around disaster debris. And then we have added some brownfields funding for one of the sites I'm going to show you. And then I think a really key part that made this work so well is we had one contractor. So the tribes had put out an RFP to hire a contractor to write their hazard mitigation plan, but they hadn't gotten any responses. So we said, well, wait, we have a great team. They're mostly landscape architects. They've never written a hazard mitigation plan, but we know they can do it. And if we want to see a different type of hazard mitigation plan, let's bring on a firm that maybe hasn't done it 1,500 times before. They can kind of take a fresh look at it, follow that guidance that we just saw. Our contractors took that guide, they followed it, but they did it sort of with fresh eyes. And it was one contractor, so they could do the design piece. They brought in great partners to do the climate assessment, and then they were able to write and finish the plan as well. And so that made it much easier than sometimes we're trying to put a couple different contractors in touch with each other. Okay, next slide. And you pretty much already saw this. I'll just mention the Montana Climate Office was that sort of local expertise that brought great experience and really helped add in that sort of future conditions piece, as well as looking at the historic patterns of disaster impacts. Next slide. I'll skip that. You already heard about some of that from Jeff. This is just one of those images where we kind of married what we heard from community members about drought and the importance of agriculture with some of those, some of that climate data that the Montana Climate Office brought in. And this was something that wasn't in their previous hazard mitigation plan that looked not only at drought by itself, but really the big impacts of drought on agriculture. Next slide. All right, so here's sort of the fun part, the pretty pictures. So this is one of those place-based projects, those place-based designs. This was a Wolf Point Resilience Hub, and Resilience Hub can mean a lot of different things. In this case, it means several different sites kind of being stitched together and connected. So we started out focusing with the input from the tribal council on this skate park, which is down here in sort of the bottom half of the picture. And this is the after design image. They knew they wanted to improve this skate park. And it really was just, it's a beautiful, very well designed skate park, but kind of plopped in the middle of this field. And we sort of realized that it could be much better connected to the high school, which is here at the top of the image, the Wolf Point Community Hall, which is where we held our workshops and design workshops with the community. And then they're building a new Head Start building. So there's not great ways right now in Wolf Point to walk between these. I mean, you can walk on this one road, but then you have to turn, and then the skate park is fenced off. So the kids have to walk way too far, or in reality, they were like hopping over the fence and cutting through. So there were some sort of workarounds, but we said, like, let's really tie all these pieces together. Next slide. And this is just a perspective image of that skate park where we added, trees to add shade and a windbreak. It's flat, like Jeff said, it gets really windy. A vegetated swale to capture runoff. We added some parking spots. We added a playground and a splash pad. So we didn't originally have a splash pad here, but we had one for Poplar. And when the Wolf Point community members saw the splash pad for the other town, they were like, they need a splash pad, we want a splash pad. So we put one here too to kind of expand the age set and the number of users for this skate park. So you now have a skate park, you've got a playground, you've got a splash pad, you've got these dirt biking trails. Kids were dirt biking anyways, so like, let's kind of make it intentional. And then there are some restrooms. There was nowhere to go to the bathroom out there. And then a solar canopy shade that both obviously provide shade, but just enough solar panels that you could have just like places for kids to charge their phone, or for parents that are sitting out there with their kids. So cooling was really the central focus, but it was trying to bring in other elements too. Next slide. This is just another perspective of what that playground equipment looks like. with a splash pad in the background. This is another one. That's what the, yeah, you can go on to the skate park one. The skate park looks just like that today. The design elements are all these trees, the walking and biking paths, benches, and some bioswales and green infrastructure there to manage runoff. All right, next slide. Okay, this is Poplar. This is another town on the reservation, a little east of Wolf Point. And what you're looking at here is, you see that little like green box, that's an old swimming pool that doesn't work anymore. Baseball field just north of it, and then a little community center. And then you've got Route 2 here. There's a highway. You can see there's no real crosswalks or anything, but they have a community center, and Fort Peck Community College are all right there. And then this is sort of one of the densest parts of the reservation. There's a lot of houses here, and you have a lot of families, multiple families, intergenerational living in one house in this area as well. So next slide. The design option here is, again, calling it a resilience hub, not just a single site and a single building, but kind of the connection between them. So starting at the top of the image, that's their existing activity center, which is like a corrugated metal building. They hold bingo night. It's a really well-used community center. They do like food pantry distribution. So we added some retrofit recommendations in the plan to improve the HVAC system there so that it can be both a cooling center when it's hot for people that don't have air conditioning nearby, a warming center in the winter, gets super cold there, adding a little microgrid on top so that it has reliable local backup power. The grid goes down a lot. We heard this from a range of people. And we have the utilities there too, just talking about how often the power goes down from straight line winds, from winter storms. And that can be a bad situation if it's -15 and you're not one of the homes that has a generator. So the activity center really became kind of like almost an emergency center for cooling and for warming, and thinking about the HVAC system as well so that it could filter air, because they're getting more and more wildfire smoke here. So I just wanted to take a second and answer a question I saw in the chat from Eric about overlapping mitigation plans with community health assessments and health improvement plans. Yes, they can be. They are not often connected, but they should be. Public health can be listed as an asset in a hazard mitigation plan, and you can call out things like wildfire smoke, extreme heat, and even mitigation for floods that can introduce mold to people's homes. These connections can and should be in a hazard mitigation plan. And then you'll see we've added crosswalks. We've created a whole park, expanded on the baseball field, created a picnic shelter. I think go to the next slide and we'll see some more of those design elements. Community garden and compost site. We worked with the language department, and they have like a seed bank and traditional plants and medicines program, but they don't have their own physical garden space. So we carved out space in this design for that department. A fruit orchard as well. Again, splash pad, we put a splash pad in there, and solar canopies again for shade and for backup power. Next slide. This is just another kind of on the ground perspective image of what the park would look like in summer with some of those gardens, basketball courts, the playground in the background. Next slide. And it was important to show what this would look like in winter, because it's winter a lot of the year there. And I'll say that the importance of really ground truthing initial design ideas with community members is so important. Our design team had an option for the splash pad can be converted to a little tiny ice rink in the winter. And they've seen that work before. And so they had that in the winter image, and kids and adults alike were like, that's cool and all, but nobody ice skates here. Nobody owns a pair of ice skates. We're not going to get ice skates. Like, that is not something that we're going to use. So it was like, okay, great. Let's take that out. So that kind of feedback is so important. Next slide. We also, again, working with the language department and the head of the woman that runs their sort of outreach to kids and programs around gardening and traditional plants to incorporate those culturally significant plants in the designs, show them in the plan, and list them in the Dakota and Nakota languages. Okay, last one. This is proposed, this is the before image of what they call the roll-off station. It's a transfer station. People can dump stuff off before it gets taken to a landfill. That's the Missouri River right in the background. And they were really concerned about potential floods reaching up and grabbing all that trash and pulling it into the river. Next slide. So we developed kind of a two-phase design for creating a nature park and ecotourism facility if that site could get cleaned up. So you see, this is what it could look like, and it is gorgeous. I mean, the before picture is kind of gorgeous if you take the tires out. Next slide. And again, like I said, this is two-phase. So there's a very kind of like low input, simpler design, which is phase one here on the left. It's just adding a parking lot with some rain gardens, picnic area, boardwalk trails, overlooks, and a little boat launch area here that you can see sort of sticking out. So that's kind of a lighter touch, cheaper approach just to do that. But phase two would include some ecotourism, or an ecotourism resort, which could have, again, building on that phase one, but adding in some places where people could come and spend the night, a communal fire pit for people to gather, a bike rental shop. And if you go to the next slide, the bike rental is tied to their Buffalo Connections Trail. So they are repopulating the grasslands there on the Fort Peck Reservation with buffalo that would otherwise be culled or killed from Yellowstone National Park. And they already have a lot of interest in people that want to come up and see that. So they're in the process of already building a trail from the sort of town center up to where they keep the buffalo, and they have stargazing platforms, story poles, and other things that are kind of being developed now. So it would be trying to, again, stitch together these things that are already happening and create a place for people to get themselves up there on bikes. Next slide. And that's because they have many points of interest all along the southern end of the reservation, from the Medicine Lake National Wildlife Refuge up here on the northeastern side, all the way down to Fort Peck Lake in the southwestern edge of the reservation. So just trying to kind of pull some of that economic opportunity up into the reservation. Next slide. So the next steps, that transfer station, it's they've got a $900,000 EPA Brownfields grant to assess and clean up the site. That's in process now. As Jeff already said, the hazard mitigation plan's been approved and adopted, and they're working with that FEMA Brick Direct Technical Assistance now and trying to reach out to get funding for many of these designs. And then the last slide is just some images of EPA resources, and we can, I'm sure, share these later that kind of build off of everything I just talked to you about. We have a disaster resilient design concept. It's just very visual of how different types of design elements can address different types of disasters. You saw that how it worked for Fort Peck Reservation, but we've generalized some of those design ideas. It's the same firm that we worked with here created that document. We have a land use and green infrastructure scorecard, which kind of walks through all the different ways you can incorporate green infrastructure in local codes and ordinances. This disaster debris, I saw a lot of questions. We have a document on managing disaster debris on tribal lands, which is super helpful. So we'll make sure that we get that out to you. We have a tribal green building toolkit, and then this regional resilience toolkit, which shows how hazard mitigation planning can tie to other types of planning work you might be doing in your community. All right, thank you so much. Sorry to have to rush through there at the end.
Awesome, thanks so much, Abby. So it looks like we have about 8 minutes left. So Rachel, do we have any questions in the chat, or does anybody want to come off mute and ask our presenters any questions?
I think Abby sort of addressed the one question in the chat. And then Shuba was able to answer some questions in the chat. But if anyone wants to come off mute or pose a new question in the chat, we have some time.
Awesome, thanks, Rachel. I'll just comment that the map, the Buffalo map, is so pretty. I love that map. And I love that it was able to be incorporated into the plan.
Okay, we have one question from Livia Popko. For extreme heat mitigation, what have you found to be the most effective?
I would say it really needs to be like a multi-pronged strategy. Ideally, people can stay safe at home. Ideally, they can keep themselves cool at home. Cooling centers are really good to have as options for people who don't have air conditioning at home, but we find that people don't like to, if they have a home, they don't like to sleep outside their home. And if you have many hot days in a row, you have a real heat wave, you need people to be able to almost sleep in the cool. So that's I think our priority is often, how do we keep people cool at home? But then the next step is having a network of cooling centers, spaces that people can go that are trusted community spaces that don't have to be these like big evacuation centers. And then, from EPA's perspective, we really try to encourage long-term planning for resilience. It's like, the best time to have planted a tree is 30 years ago. So you've got the shade today. The next best time to plant a tree is today, so that you have, you're building that canopy up over time. And, it doesn't just have to be trees. It can be cool roofs, painting roofs white when they're black. I mean, there are a number of approaches that are really important to think about kind of across the whole community. And I'll put a link in the chat to some of the resources that we do have at EPA on that. And then I'll just say too, it's also really important to communicate with people about heat risk. I think people don't understand necessarily always like the difference between, it's important for people to understand like how to watch for symptoms of impacts for heat. There are certain types of groups of people that are more vulnerable to heat impacts. And so we also really encourage just kind of education and awareness. And that often comes from public health agencies at the local level, communicating heat risk to people that need that information the most.
Any other questions from the group?
I have a question. This is Kathleen for Abby. And I know, and Felicity, you're still on the call as well, but so I think all of those plans are just they're so amazing. That's really cool. What are the funding options and how long and do you think it will take and to implement and fund these plans? And maybe some already have been, but you mentioned the $900,000 grant for the cleanup, but what about the other projects?
I mean, conceivably, it could move very quickly if there's funding available to implement these projects, especially I feel like in tribal communities where it's the tribal, if the tribal government is on board and supportive, things can move very quickly in terms of getting projects approved and permitted and moving forward. So like those park improvements, for instance, like that's all, I won't say it's simple, but I think it's just, it depends on the money. If the money is there, the construction can happen quickly. And I've sort of been learning that in thinking about the community change grant program that Jeff mentioned. They are intending to apply for. Those funds are supposed to be spent within 3 years. And I think that's a good example of, I mean, yet to be seen. Those awards haven't started being announced yet, but the idea is that if you put enough money into it and can show that project readiness and get everything lined up, that the actual construction implementation can happen fairly quickly.
Awesome. Well, with 2 minutes left, I think I will close out. Thank you, Abby, Kathleen, and Jeff for being here with us today, and for everyone for joining us for this webinar. Again, we will have this recording up on our website, and we will be able to share out the slides, as well as other resources that were talked about today. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to us at NIHB. And yeah, thanks again, everyone, for being here, and have a great evening.